Welcome to the Friends of Fantasy Benefits Baseball Podcast. I'm Justin Mason, lead fantasy writer and analyst at friendsoffantasybenefits.com. Joining me on this episode, as always, is Ray Kuhn. How you doing, my friend?
I am good. We got another exciting week of baseball. We got Ron Washington throwing one of his players under the bus and getting ready to, hopefully as long as air travel cooperates tomorrow, go to Citi Field South and sit with probably 4,000 other Mets fans and 1,000 Marlins fans and watch the Knicks playoff game on our phones while we see the Mets taking on the Marlins. So all is good.
Yeah, I mean, I've never been to the Marlins Stadium. I've heard it's a great place to go watch a game, even though not many people go.
Yeah, it is. In fact, the last cruise we went on, it lined up the same way, where we were able to parlay the two. And seeing that sculpture in person, that is definitely an interesting experience. But yeah, it's weird kind of walking around and literally seeing nothing in the upper deck. But it is a nice place to see a game.
I assume it's very similar to like going to an Oakland A's game, which I'm going to do this year before the final, game at the Coliseum. So, but going there and like seeing so many empty seats is kind of a little jarring, especially when you're used to like kind of packed crowds.
It's weird because it's so quiet too. It's so weird that it's almost like going to like a minor league game or like a independent league game or something like that. That I think I've seen more people at Long Island Ducks games that I've gone to.
Yeah, that's not really my my preferred way to watch a game. If I'm going to watch a game, I want the experience of the crowd. I want people, going crazy, and But I definitely want to check out the Marlins Stadium at some point. I gotta do a stadium tour at some point.
Yes,
figure out a way of getting that done. We're gonna talk some news. None of it good. It's all bad news. And then we're gonna jump into a kind of a quieter week so far, at least in FAAB. Obviously, if we get some call-ups over the weekend, things may change a little bit, but it seems like this might be a good week to go on vacation and not worry so much about FAAB. So it kind of lines up perfectly for you. Let's start with kind of the crappiest news, at least for me, because I'm a big TJ Friedl guy. Dude misses pretty much the entire season with, it was like a broken arm, I think, right? Something like that. Is back for 6 days and breaks his thumb. What are you doing with TJ Friedl?
I feel, and it's tough because it's like, all right, you held him the first time, now you got to go back and hold him again, and I don't think this is going to be a quick thing. Again, it's a thumb injury. You worry about the power when he comes back. You're probably going to have to, unfortunately, cut him. I mean, I guess ultimately the other thing comes down to is I wouldn't cut him just for the sake of cutting him to pick up somebody that's going to sit on your bench that might not have upside. Obviously, if you need to fill a spot or if you have an opportunity to improve your team and you have to drop him, unfortunately, take it. But I wouldn't say he's a 100% automatic drop, at least not this week. Next week, it might be a different situation.
Yeah, I feel bad for the people who picked him up on FAAB. I'm pretty sure I saw in at least a couple leagues, and I'm trying to bring it up real quick, where like he went for like $200 in FAAB, where people are like, oh, he's going to be activated soon. He got back a lot sooner than we kind of expected him to. And then all of a sudden, like, he's hurt again, which just, is, So he was picked up in 71 NFBC leagues this week with a max bid of $333 in a main event. In another main event, he went for $272. People really, some people spent, a quarter or a third of their FAAB trying to get him on their team, and now they didn't even get a full week. Like they just,
pardon the pun, it's a tough break. On the surface, if you're getting Friedl for, even if it's a 30-year FAAB, he's a starting outfielder. He's an outfield 3, outfield 4, depending on your team, depending on the injuries. I mean, on the surface, yeah, it's a great move, but it's a really tough spot. But again, we've said it before that you can't, when you're making roster decisions, it's hard to kind of be paralyzed by the fact of, I just spent $300 on him in FAAB, so now I'm going to hold him for that reason.
Yeah, I mean, in a 10-team league, you're probably cutting bait. 12-team league, it's debatable, and I'm sure at a 15, you're probably holding. I mean, it's only supposed to be, I think for 3 to 4 weeks. So hopefully, and he came back quicker than we expected last time. So maybe he comes back quicker this time. But it's just brutal. I have him on a couple of teams, and it's not feeling great. Nick Lodolo goes to the IL. What are you doing here?
They said it's a groin injury. They said it's going to be quick. I mean, I think that's the default in most situations, that they say, yeah, it's going to be quick. I'm probably going to hold him here. I mean, it's only 35 innings, but he walked 9 guys in 35 innings. For him, that's huge. He still struck out 43. He was starting to use his slider a little bit more. Home runs were down. The strikeout upside, I like Lodolo if he can kind of control, balance everything. So I'm going to hold him, hope it's just 2.5 weeks. He misses a few starts, and he comes back and picks up where he left off.
Yeah, I don't think you're dropping Lodolo in any spot. Like, I mean, unless you're just like completely decimated in a 10, he's been too good. 3.34 ERA, but the underlying numbers say he's actually even better than that. So, plus he hasn't sacrificed, in spite of the fact he's not walking guys, and he's not giving up home runs. He hasn't sacrificed strikeouts to get there. Right? He's just been elite, honestly. And while I don't necessarily expect him to not give up many home runs in Cincinnati, because as things warm up in Cincinnati over the summer, the ball just start flying a little bit more. I just think he's going to be I think he's going to be pretty damn good, rest of the way. You're holding on to Lodolo, I think, in just about every format. Jung Hoo Lee separates his shoulder, which is kind of, just a huge bummer. I mean, he has been much better than I thought he was going to be. I really thought that this had a ton of bust potential, but he's actually been pretty decent defensively, which has been kind of the biggest surprise for me. I really thought he was going to struggle defensively in that big outfield. So this is a huge bummer. There is damage to the shoulder, which or structural damage to the shoulders. So I think that this is probably a pretty easy cut in most formats. Where are you at?
Yeah, unfortunately, I agree. I think it is. I mean, the interesting thing now is it looks like Yastrzemski's going to lead off. He crushed a homer last night. And then you have Ramos is going to get another chance to show what he can do. He had a heck of a start to the year in AAA. 30 games, he hit 296, 8 homers, 21 RBIs. So it's going to be interesting to see what he can do now with regular playing time.
Yeah, and also Luis Matos is up. He's one who replaced Jung Hoo Lee on the roster. He actually crashed into the wall around the same spot as Jung Hoo Lee. So there was someone who was joking they need to bubble wrap that area of the fence on their day off today. But he was able to finish out the game. He had a home run yesterday. Matos is actually the one I'm a little bit interested in. This is a former top 100 prospect. Ramos is too. I just don't know that Ramos is ever gonna, especially in that park, be a huge factor. But I think Matos, especially defensively, he's a pretty good center fielder. He just got some speed, hit a home run last night, so there's a little bit of pop there. I think if you're looking for a short-term replacement, Matos might be the dude.
He's definitely interesting. I think that's I'd rather go there than maybe some of the other guys that we might talk about a little bit later that are boring old veterans.
Yeah.
That if he's going to get the playing time, I'd rather take the guy. There's a reason why he was a top 100 prospect.
Yeah.
And it's not like he's super old at this point either.
Yeah, I agree. And then finally, Rhys Hoskins goes to the IL. Doesn't seem super serious. Or what do you do? Are you doing anything with Rhys Hoskins here?
Probably not. I mean, we went through it last week. I mean, corner infield is tough.
Yeah.
As far as finding replacements. I mean, maybe if like a Carlos Santana's still available in your league, but I think in the 15s, he's most likely all gone at this point. So, I mean, depends on the roster crunch, but I'm going to try really hard to avoid cutting Hoskins, knowing that the alternative you're cutting him for is not that good, and hoping you can kind of make do and move around other pieces the back end of your roster. Looks like Jake Bauers is going to get another chance, at least against right-handed pitching. It's a little bit intriguing from the power, a little bit of pop, a little bit of speed, but nothing that I'm going to go crazy about, because it's very possible he can get 2 homers and 2 stolen bases in a week, but he could also hit, 190 and they play Owen Miller. So I think deeper leagues, maybe he might be one of your better options as a quick fix, but I have a hard time outright dropping Hoskins.
Yeah, I'm not dropping Hoskins, especially when they've got like Miami coming up on the docket at the beginning of next week. I know they have Houston for the weekend. So, but I mean, it's not like they've got like the strongest of Houston starters. They do have Verlander, but again, Hunter Brown, who's been a home run machine. And Spencer Getty, who's been, meh. Like I'm not like, I know you're an Astros fan, so
I feel like, it's one of those things that's deceiving, because talk about Arrighetti, it's like, oh, he's the 3rd ranked Astros prospect or whatever he is, depending on what site you're looking at. But part of the reason why he's a 3rd ranked prospect is because they don't have many other guys that are better. If you would have put him in a different system, he's maybe in the teens.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily the 3rd ranked prospect in the Astros system right now is not the 3rd ranked prospect in another system. It's not a good comparison.
I play in a dynasty league where, it's a really, really, really deep dynasty league. And there's a guy in my league, and every time he offers you a trade that includes some of his prospects, he tells you where they're at in the system. So, like, this is the 3rd ranked player in the Astros system, or this is the 17th ranked player in the Rockies system. And it's like, that's not a good number. Like, don't use that. No, like, don't, like, you are arguing against yourself right here. Like, if you're telling me, like, in a bad system that they're like the 7th ranked prospect, like that doesn't make me feel any better about making this deal with you, dude. If anything, that makes me feel like you don't know what you're doing.
Exactly. I mean, that's one of my pet peeves, is when people send you a trade in Dynasty, like, oh, this is a X ranked prospect. It's like, all right, listen, I get it. There's certain sites, certain places that are kind of generally accepted consensus, but at the end of the day, we're playing this, and especially in those deeper leagues, because we have our own opinions and our own lists.
Yeah.
And you can't just sit there and make a trade off a list.
Well, and especially too, because like if you're using fantasy dynasty prospect ranks, right, somewhere, like whether it's like at RotoWire, Prospects Live, or places like that, right, like they're not normally doing a fantasy prospect rank based on the organization. Like when you hit me with like, oh, he's the Orioles, 27th prospect. Like, you're getting your information from a site that is not catered to fantasy.
Yeah.
And to me, like, that tells me, like, you don't know the difference between a fantasy prospect list and a real life prospect list, because there's a massive difference. And I think at this point, everybody should be, you should be mostly working from fantasy stuff, because that's the game we're playing.
Oh, 100%. But I mean, even still, like, you're going to tell me there's really that much of a difference between the 200th best prospect on RotoWire and the 300th?
No.
And nobody, I don't think anyone's going to follow you if you put the 300th guy ahead of the 200th guy.
Yeah.
Based on your preferences.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I because I outsource a lot of my prospect stuff, like I follow a lot of these guys, who are doing these, dynasty prospect lists. And when I compare and contrast notes between different lists, it's like, oh, this guy's 200 spots above that guy. That means there probably isn't that much difference. Like, it's
exactly.
So, all right, let's move on into this week's FAAB. It isn't, I'm not going to lie and be like, hey, it's a great week to do FAAB. This is a good week to take your family out. Get your FAAB done early. and go do something with your family on Saturday or Sunday. Enjoy maybe some nice weather in your location, or if you're in a bad weather location, read a good book. It's a pretty boring week. We'll start with the main closer situation that seems to be changing, and that's the Rockies closer situation. Jalen Beeks seems to be kind of moving himself into that conversation. My question to you, though, is do we care about a Rockies closer?
I think we have to care in the sense that there's only 30 of them.
Yeah.
So kind of based on the economics of it, we have to care. How much I care is a very different story. I mean, he does have saves 4 out of his last 5 appearances. I think it was 3 saves in 4 days, but his last save, he walked the bases loaded against San Diego. So we're not talking about, peaceful, easy feeling here. He doesn't necessarily strike guys out. Walks are a big problem. Right now, yeah, he has a 2.21 ERA, but he also has a 193 BABIP and a 463 FIP. So he's in the seat now. He's getting the results. I don't know how long he's going to stay in the seat. It's not like Justin Lawrence and Tyler Kinney or any of those other guys are really going to be beating down the door. But if he needs saves, he's getting them right now. And that's maybe the nicest thing I can say. Again, I mean, who knows? He could end up the year with 20 saves and a crappy ERA, but saves are saves, and there's only so many of them, and you need them to compete.
Yeah, I mean, you even looked at like what he did in his last save attempt. Like he walked 3 guys in that inning. Like he got out of it unscathed, didn't allow him to score, but like this isn't like a Daniel Bard situation, I don't think, that where like all of a sudden on a bad Rockies team, he's going to get 30 saves. But if you're desperate for saves, I totally understand making a bid. Like to me, I hate these guys that, they get, hey, saves are saves. Saves. No, saves are not saves. When a guy is giving you like crappy ass ratios and you're then having to figure out how to make that up later. Like, this is why I pay for saves. Like, this is why I'm not like, I try my best to not like deal in the bottom of the barrel because guys like Jalen Beeks will kill your whip. He probably will kill your ERA. So for me, like, I get it. If you're going to make a bid, I just don't go crazy unless I guess if you really have to, like if saves are all you need, I guess you can go crazy, but I probably won't end up with him anywhere.
But again, to that point, you're potentially gaining saves, and you're most likely sacrificing ERA, sacrificing whip. The way he's going now, sacrificing strikeouts. So I mean, you really have to do a deep dive of your roster and the standings to determine the trade-off. And again, to your other point, in a lot of my leagues, knock on wood, if I have 2, early-ish round closers that are doing well, I don't know that I'm going to even bother to bid on Beeks in those leagues because it's very possible he goes on my bench, and by the time I would potentially start him, he's going to be out of the closer role.
And that's the thing. If, if we come back in a week or two and we're talking about, oh, it looks like Justin Lawrence has the job or Jake Bird has the job, like, are we going to be really that surprised? Like, I don't think we will be. So, yeah, I'm not overly worried about that at all. What about Abraham Toro, who has like he had a little bit of fantasy relevance a couple years ago. He was on my deep sleepers list at third base, 1 year and kind of, made a little bit of hay, but then kind of disappeared to, back to being kind of irrelevant. But he has been absolutely unreal this year. And he's still available in a number of leagues. Are you picking up Abraham Toro this week?
I might as a lower bid. He's one of those guys that I feel like there's a point, not necessarily last year, but it happened in 2021, happened in 2022 at times, where you're looking at the wire and he's one of the better options available depending on your league. Problem with him is he doesn't have much power, doesn't have much speed. He's hitting, I think, 287 right now, so he's hitting for a good average. 4 home runs in 42 games is actually pretty good for him. 22 runs scored, 17 RBI. So if I have the need, I'm going to bid on him. But he's one of those guys where I don't see much long-term potential in him other than if I'm looking to fill the need of either an injury or somebody that's truly underperforming right now.
Yeah, it's such like an empty stat line. Wow, he went for $300 in the league. Oh my god.
And the other problem is
no, sorry, it was 201. But still, that's insane.
Yeah, because my other problem with him is, right now he's playing every day and he's hitting well, but Oakland has nothing invested in him. What's to stop? He goes in a slump. He sits and then he sits on the bench and he stops playing.
Yeah. Yeah, to me, like, I just think it is it's such an empty line. Now, on the on the plus side, he is eligible at second and third, which means you can use him at MI or CI. So it gives you a lot of different kind of eligibilities to kind of use as a backup option. He is making an insane amount of in-zone contact. 94% zone contact is nothing to sneeze at. So while I don't expect his BABIP to, stay as high as it has, and I expect his batting average to regress because of that, like, I still think he's probably like a 260 hitter, with a little bit of pop and a little bit of speed, playing regularly in Oakland. Like, this is a decent, like, deep league kind of bench option to kind of cover your bases, especially with the amount of injuries we've seen this year. But, like, do I think this is a quote unquote breakout? No, it's not any sort of breakout. I think this is just something to use as a gap filler for right now.
Yeah, I mean, the end zone contact is great, but he also has a 29% hard hit rate.
Yeah, he just doesn't have a ton of power. And in that park, like, having like a sub 30% hard hit rate, like, is not going to play real well.
Exactly. Exactly. That's my concern. I mean, the versatility, the regular at bats right now, that helps 100%.
Yeah. Davis Schneider is another one of those guys that he's got picked up in quite a few leagues last week. He's going to get picked up in probably the rest of them, or the vast majority of them this week. Another guy who is multi-position eligible at second base in the outfield. He's hitting 258, 371, 464 with 4 home runs and 2 stolen bases. This is one of those guys that is very, very polarizing in the fantasy industry. People either love him and think, hey, this guy's going to break out, or people absolutely despise him and think, like, this is not going to be, he's not going to be a successful major leaguer. Where are you at on Davis Schneider?
I'm probably more on the pro Davis Schneider side than the con. I mean, I definitely have him ahead of Toro. And the big thing for me is he's a 19% barrel rate. He has 13 barrels out of 68 batted balls. So to me, if I'm looking for the upside and the potential, he does strike out a ton. Right now, the batting average at 258 is probably the best it's going to be. But it's a decent lineup. If he's getting regular playing time, I'd rather go after the guy that hits the ball well, that squares it up and hits it a little bit harder. I'm not saying that he's going to magically turn that barrel rate into 30 home runs, but I mean, he did hit 21 homers in 87 games at AAA last year. So, again, doing it at the major league level, completely different thing. I get that. He does have a 22-degree average launch angle. So, I like him maybe more than the majority, but I'm not in that, oh my God, he's going to be the second coming camp either.
Yeah, see, I'm on the opposite end of the spectrum. Like, I coming into the season, I was like, this dude's garbage. Like, this dude is just absolute garbage. Now, I'm walking that back a little bit because he has made improvements in the zone contact. It's above 80%, but that's still fair amount below league average. Strikeouts way too much. I think his XBA is like around 236 or something like that. I don't think he is a particularly good hitter. Now, when he makes contact, like, hey, he does barrel it up. So, but he doesn't have enough like exit velocity to like turn those barrels into homers on a regular basis. So for me, like, I think this is a worse skill set of an Abraham Toro, right? So personally, and especially when you're playing on a team like Toronto, where, well, yes, the lineup around him is better, but he's much more easily replaced because they have other options. Like, Orville's Martinez is in the minor leagues. And like eventually he's going to come up and play second base. And I just don't know that Schneider's going to have a really long-term impact. So for me, like, I'm not really that interested in Schneider. He may be a guy who goes on like on my waterfall bids if I really need like a second baseman or just some, bench depth. But like, he is not going to be a major target for me at any point. I just have never been a believer in Schneider.
Yeah. I don't know that he's going to be the number one on a bit of mine. I mean, maybe depending on the league and the need, but definitely not in a 12-teamer.
All right. Chris Paddack is, one of those guys who was picked up in a lot of leagues this week. He'd been pitching really, really well. Kind of ran into a little bit of a rough spot against the Yankees in the first start of the week. He's got a second start later this week, which is why he's one of more of the picked up guys. But I want to check in with you. Where are you at on Chris Paddack? Because he has pitched fairly well in most of his starts this year. And this is a guy who at one point was a top-tier prospect. Everybody's really excited about him. And then, injuries kind of derailed that. Are you in on Chris Paddack?
I am. I have multiple shares already of him. To be honest, I mean, right now, the 4.89 ERA is a little bit troubling, but xERA 4.27, 3.87 BABIP. So there's some adjustment there. Homers are still an issue, but he's striking out about a batter an inning, 2 walks per 9. So, and again, he was a top prospect. He looks to be healthy. I'm not saying he's going to be a front of the rotation guy, but he's doing I think he's doing a good job of kind of getting healthy, finding his groove a little bit. He's introduced a slider this year, so a little bit of change of approach out of him. So if you haven't picked him up already and he's available, I would grab him. And kind of at first, and also the other thing, first pitch strike is back up to 64%. So, I mean, last year he didn't pitch much, but I like the first pitch strike. I mean, swing strike rate is kind of around his career norms, 11.4 this year, but I think there's a good amount to like.
Yeah, I'm still a little bit on the fence on Paddack. I do like the addition of the slider. I think it just gives him another offering to throw, which I think was one of the things that once the league started to catch back up to him, he just didn't have that like real third pitch to kind of go to, and he does. That being said, like, he just doesn't have like it's not an amazing slider. Like, he's still a great fastball. Like, he's still got a great fastball. And I just think he's one of those guys that's a little bit mediocre, which kind of fits perfectly into that Twins team, which I feel is like a little bit mediocre. So I think at 15s, I definitely want to, continue to kind of use him and kind of spot start him. And 10s and 12s, I think he's more of just a straight streamer, to be quite honest. Like, I know like I said, he got picked up in a lot of leagues this week for this 2-start, but it was a pretty tough 2-start with the Yankees. Yeah. At the front of the week. And then I believe it is Cleveland at the end of the week. Now Cleveland has cooled down a little bit, but it's still a pretty deep lineup. So I'll be interested to see how he pitches there. I'm not ready to like get back on board the Chris Paddack train, though, to be quite honest. I was not really on the Chris Paddack train at any point. So maybe that is coloring my glasses a little bit in that regard. What about Brent Rooker, another A's player that is just absolutely on fire? And if you don't follow Brent Rooker on Twitter, you should, because he's actually an amazing person to interact with on Twitter. Like, just really open about the process and how he does things and, what he thinks about different topics within MLB. Are you picking up Brent Rooker if he's available anywhere?
If he is, yeah. I mean, quite honestly, I'm not sure why he would be. I know beginning of the year he was injured, but I mean, the guy still hit 30 home runs last year, so it's not like he's completely out of nowhere. Granted, last year he barely drove anybody in that wasn't himself. This year, that at least is going better. He has 10 homers, 28 RBIs, and I mean, this is the second A's player we're talking about. So, makes me feel a little bit weird. Guy's slugging 600, 14% barrel rate. Every other ball is hard hit, 20-degree average launch angle. So, I mean, even though he plays in that big park, he's still producing, getting the stats, getting the numbers. He's not going to hit 288 all year. But again, even if he hits 240 and he continues with this power, I think he has to be rostered. I'm not sure that there's many leagues where you're going to have 5 better outfielders than him.
I would struggle to find a league where you're going to find 5 better outfielders than him for most teams. It's such a weird profile because, I mean, Brent Rooker is a former top prospect. I think he broke his leg when he was coming up through the minor leagues, the Minnesota system, and kind of derailed. The other guys, kind of emerged in that system to kind of block him as well. Ends up with Oakland, goes on that tear where he's just murdering left-handed pitching, hits the 30 home runs. And you kind of go, okay, well, this is a guy who can mash, but he's really mashing against lefties, right? This year, it's the complete opposite. He's not hitting lefties very well, but he is murdering right-handed pitching. Now, some of that on both ends of the spectrum, the struggle against lefties and the goodness against righties, is BABIP being fueled. And I think they'll kind of come back together and meet in the middle. But I actually think he has made some pretty nice improvements. He's gone from a guy who was sub 80% zone contact last year, even with the 30 home runs, to 87% zone contact, which is a little bit above league average, which is exactly what you want to see. He is probably the best hitter on this team. Maybe if he didn't wear that wristband, he wouldn't have been benched early or randomly put on the IL. But I think if Brent Rooker is available in your league, or someone wants to try to sell high on him right now in your league, like, that's the guy to go get. He would easily be at the top of any of my lists this week. The guy who's always been at the top of my list, just because I've always loved Max Kepler, is Max Kepler. He's just a guy that it does a little bit of everything, is kind of boring, but has never seemed to live up to the potential that I personally and other people personally have had for him. So far, he's killing it this year, though. Where are you at on Max Kepler?
Again, Kepler's one of those guys that got hurt. So he's in a weird situation, depending on your league, if he was dropped. But I think similar to Friedl, before Friedl unfortunately got hurt again, if he was dropped and you're able to pick him up, or if you did pick him up, or if you can pick him up, if he's still available, go get him, because I'm not sure you're going to find 5 better outfielders to start than Kepler being one of them. Last year he had 24 homers. I mean, he's not an overwhelming power guy, but I like the approach at the plate. He's going to be a solid batting average guy. He's going to drive in some runs. So, I mean, maybe he doesn't necessarily do anything great or have that one standout tool, but it's a strong approach. So, I think there's no reason why he shouldn't be owned in the majority of leagues.
Yeah, I mean, he's not going to hit 318 the rest of the way. He's hitting 318 right now. A lot of that is influenced just by a pretty high BABIP right now, but he is making 90% zone contact. He is hitting the ball fairly hard. He already has the highest max exit velocity, I think, of his career. He hit a ball 115.4 miles per hour, so that tied the highest max exit velocity of his career. Max Kepler is the epitome of an accumulator. He's a dude, he does not do anything particularly well, but he just does enough in everything to be interesting. The one thing that he does do particularly well, which isn't a fantasy stat, but is important for fantasy, he's a good defender. He's not going to come out of the lineup very often. So while I think in 10-team leagues, you're probably it's Max Kepler. In 12 and 15-team leagues, the fact he's going to volume his way to 25 home runs and probably 8 to 10 stolen bases with, a 260 batting average has some real value, especially because he's going to be in your lineup every week. And for those of you, I know we don't do a lot of points league content and we don't do a lot of head-to-head content, in the industry in general, or even on this podcast, like he is like the perfect points league guy. He's the perfect head-to-head guy because you could pretty much pencil in a decent stat line for him every week. He's never going to win you a week, but he's never going to lose you a week, which are the guys that I really like in kind of points leagues and head-to-head format. So I love Max Kepler. I always have. I'm gonna go to my grave thinking Max Kepler is just a dude. So breakout's never coming, but no. I just love the dude. All right. I don't know why everybody's gonna fall for it. Alec Manoah, like people. I don't know why people are picking him up. Are you picking up Alec Manoah?
I mean, it's again, the talent is there. But, I mean, his numbers, granted, he's made 2 starts and pitched in 11 innings. So the numbers are going to be all over the place, and I'm not sure we can truly take anything meaningful from that and say because he's done X, Y, Z, we should automatically draw a conclusion. I mean, I think I will say I'm not heavily investing from a bid perspective on him, but it's very possible that somebody does and he all of a sudden flips that switch and boom, it wins you a league. If I had a bet, I'd say it's not going to happen, that he's still too erratic, still too many issues with the control for me to really feel great about. But if you can get him for cheap, stick him on your bench and then maybe kind of see or stream him against maybe like a White Sox or something like that. If he gets to start against a team like that, then I do it. But this isn't something that I'm going to go out and spend triple digits on. Again, I could be wrong, but I just don't know that he's there yet or that he'll ever get there for that matter.
I am so scared of Alec Manoah after what he did to me last year. I was one of the biggest Alec Manoah supporters last year, and he just buried me in just about every league. Here's the thing. He gets Tampa Bay on Sunday, which is not a bad matchup. Like Tampa Bay has not been great offensively. So he then gets at Detroit. He then gets at the White Sox. Like, it's a pretty good setup for the next 3 starts. So, like, as much as I am not an Alec Manoah guy, and I don't know that I would actually pick him up and use him because you saw in that first start versus the Nationals, right? Like, he couldn't find the zone. He was giving up hits left and right. And even like his most recent start against Minnesota, where he went 7 scoreless, if you're talking earned runs, he still gave up 3 runs. They were just unearned. I don't trust Alec Manoah, but if you were an Alec Manoah backer, if you want to be a believer, you're not going to get a better 3-start stretch than probably right here.
Because, I mean, that kind of says it right off the bat. If you're not willing to use him against Detroit and Chicago, then it's very, very difficult to justify the triple digits. But at the same point, you know he's going to get picked up. And maybe the worst thing he can do is go out and throw another 7 scoreless against Tampa. Because it's not going to even necessarily matter whether he commands the zone, whether he gets into trouble with the walks. If he throws 6 or 7 scoreless or even allows 1 or 2 runs and strikes out 7 or 8 guys, and then with those 2 matchups coming, people are going to be jumping up and down, right or wrong for him. But the problem is I don't even necessarily want to say, it would be great if he gets rocked on Sunday, because then his price is going to go down, because then you have to wonder at what point Toronto's going to pull the plug on him again in being in the rotation. And if he can't control the zone against Tampa, then what's to say he does it against Chicago and Detroit? So it's a really, really tricky spot.
It's not like he was even good in the minors this year.
No.
Like I just don't know. I won't do it, but I also want to throw it out there. Hey, when I'm looking for streamers, the first thing I'm looking at is matchups, right? I'm and then I start really looking at, hey, is this a pitcher that's worth this matchup? But I don't know that I would do it, but a lot of people are going to, and it's not necessarily a bad strategy because of the matchups, but no, it just scares the crap out of me. Another guy who scares the crap out of me, but has just been unreal this year, is Trevor Williams. And Dave and I got in a little bit of an argument because he was all like, why are you rostering Trevor Williams in so many leagues? It's like, because he's pitching well. Like, I don't buy it. Like, I don't think it's going to last. But like at some point, like you just kind of roll with it until the wheels fall off. He had pretty much his best start of his career versus the best team in baseball, or at least the best team in the American League in the Orioles, recently. Had a pretty decent start, though he did get bailed out by some of his runs being unearned at the beginning of the week. He's going to Philadelphia at the weekend. Or are you sticking with Trevor Williams? Or are you picking him up in any leagues he might still be available in?
I don't know that I'm starting him against Philly if you have that choice at this point. But if he's available, I'm probably going to pick him up. I mean, at some point, if you get enough of the same result that it becomes a pattern, you have to buy into it. But you can take that both ways. You can take it as Trevor Williams' career to this point has led us down one path, and then you can take it down the other of he has consistently generated some good outings this year, and that brings you down the other path. He has a 194 ERA, and he's doing with an average fastball velocity of just under 90 miles an hour. And this day and age, as we know, that's definitely not what pitchers are striving for. At the same time, though, we're seeing all these guys that throw hard that get hurt. And I think there's something to be said for hitters accustomed to seeing 95 to 98 mile an hour bullets in every at bat, because after you get to the third time in the order, you have guys coming out of the bullpen like a conveyor belt, all throwing hard. And then you get somebody like Williams, that some of these guys have changeups harder than his fastball, that it screws up the timing. I'm not saying, I mean, again, Williams isn't even striking out 7 guys per 9. So, not that you're getting much there. The ERA is good. It's 194. Even the xERA at 330, that's still good.
Yeah.
And there's still value in that. But all of a sudden, he's giving up 0.22 home runs per 9 innings after giving up 2 home runs per 9 innings last year. So, and he's only averaging 5 innings a start. So, it sets you behind from a strikeout perspective. He does have 4 wins in his 8 starts. You have to pay attention, and you have to go where the results take you. But this is truly matchup dependent for me.
Yeah. I mean, if you have the opportunity to sit him against Philadelphia, I don't necessarily want to use him there. I did use him in all of my, leagues where I had where in my weekly leagues where I have a 2-start week this week. He does go to Seattle next week, which is a good park to pitch in an offense that has not really done much versus right-handed pitching this year. They're the 23rd offense versus right-handed pitching. So I think that in itself is enough to kind of keep him going for you. And like in your shallower leagues where he is kind of still available in a few of them, like, yeah, I think I'm picking him up for the Seattle start next week and then just kind of playing it by ear. But this is the definition of a team streamer. Like, you need to just pick and curate your starts with him very, very carefully, because not only is he throwing 90 miles an hour, he's not throwing in the zone. The reason he's not giving up home runs is because I'm not going in the zone. Screw the zone. I'm staying out of the zone. And it's working. He's doing enough where he's not walking guys because he's eliciting a lot of weak contact, and guys are chasing out of the zone. But this isn't going to work forever. He's going to get beat up this summer at some point, and you're going to be like, oh wow, look at that jump in ERA. But for right now, just kind of roll with it, and then kind of, I think and honestly, if he gets beat up by Philadelphia this weekend, he'll be the most dropped player. But I think you should hold him for that Seattle start. He's going to be in a lot of my lineups for Seattle.
Yeah, so far this year is 4 barreled balls against him. So
yeah, that's going to change.
100%. But now who do you start next week? You start Manoah or do you start Williams?
Oh, I'll start Williams all day long. Like I'm not starting. I'm not gonna start Manoah over Williams. No way. All right. Eddie Rosario is getting picked up a lot. Is this a guy you would jump on? He's been he started off extremely slow. So if you look at like the overall stat line, you're going, why are people picking him up? But you look at what he's done over the last few weeks, he's been on fire. Are you jumping back on the Eddie Rosario train?
I think probably the most notable thing to me is that he has 6 stolen bases already this year.
Yeah.
So, and again, if you want to go by the back of the baseball card, he hit 21 homers and drove in 74 runs last year. So it's not like we're seeing him with the recent hot streak and saying, oh, where did this come from? Like Eddie Rosario has had some productive major league seasons or major league stretches. So if I have the need, I am going to pick him up and put him out there for a week or two and see what happens. I'm not going to necessarily be rash, but as long as he's hitting well, I have some level of belief in him because he is getting regular playing time. I mean, granted, it's by default, but still.
Yeah, I mean, Eddie Rosario is just doing Eddie Rosario things, which is sometimes Eddie Rosario is going to struggle and go through like awful cold streaks like we saw in April. And then sometimes he's just going to be hot as all get out, as we're seeing right now in May. In the month of May, he's hitting 353, 450, 765 with 4 home runs and 4 stolen bases. Is this going to continue? No. Like he's running with a 421 BABIP. He's got a 76% zone contact. Like this is all a facade, but this is what Eddie Rosario does. And so this is another one of those guys, like a team streamer, right? Like he goes into your lineup while he's hot, comes out of your lineup when he's not hot, and you kind of just roll with the punches. Like I think at the end of the year, you're probably going to be looking at a guy who hits 20 plus home runs, steals 8, 10 bases. Very Max Kepler-ish, but without the huge ups and downs. Like Max Kepler usually it's kind of just like a steady Eddie, whereas Eddie Rosario is not a steady Eddie and just kind of like really hot one week, really low another week. Definitely not a guy I want in points leagues or in your head-to-head leagues because he can kind of sink you, as we saw at the beginning of the season in weeks. But yeah, he's hot right now. He's playing every day right now. Like he played both ends of the doubleheader the other day. Like I'm totally fine using Eddie Rosario until he cools down. But he's one of those guys, like he goes right back to the waiver wire when he does.
Yeah. I have no problem cutting him if he gets cold. Or if they come to their senses and call up James Wood.
They're not going to. Like, I mean, if they were going to do it, they would have already done it, right? Like,
yeah.
I get like everybody like kind of wish casting like a James Wood like breakout season into existence. But unfortunately for everybody, like the Nationals have no reason to call him up. They're not good. And like they want the extra year of service time. So like the earliest he comes up is once the Super 2 deadline passes, which I think is usually end of June, early July. I can never figure it out because it's not like a set date or anything like that. But more realistically, they'll bring him up at like the end of August, and that'll be his debut time. So like if you're holding on to James Wood in anything but a DC, like you're wasting your time right
now. 100%.
As much as I think he's going to be great. Like I do think he's going to be great once he is up. But like it's not worth holding on for another 3 months.
No, and I drafted him in a league or two, but he's gone. He's off my roster.
Yeah. Pick him back up, and stash him at the beginning of August. But they're what they're going to do is they're going to wait to keep his rookie eligibility intact for next year. And and so they'll, even when he comes up, like let's say he comes up at the end of August, like they will just make sure he does not cross the rookie thresholds. Like, so he won't play every day either. So like he won't even be worth it probably at the end of the year.
No.
So, all right. Next guy and the final guy on the list is Jonathan Aranda. Aranda is a really, really interesting dude who, like some other prospects that we've seen, is a really poor defender, but like a pretty decent hitter. Like, dude just knows how to hit the ball. He is back on the Rays roster. Looks like he's going to be on the strong side of a platoon at second base. Any interest in Jonathan Aranda?
I mean, it's a Tampa Bay special. It's these guys that can hit, that benefit from platooning or will platoon. Can't play much defense, but they can hit. So they sent Curtis Mead down. Aranda's up. I think his bat is worthy of our attention.
Yeah, I mean, he's a guy, like, he doesn't necessarily have a ton of power. He doesn't have any speed, but he doesn't necessarily have any power, or not any. He doesn't have much power, but he has a really good hit tool, and like that plays, I think, a little bit in 15-team leagues. Now, in your 10s and 12s, don't worry about Jonathan Aranda. He's got a platoon. And he's not like a Brent Rooker type where, like, hey, well, Rooker may platoon, but he could still hit you 30 bombs. Aranda's not that guy. He's not an accumulator. He needs, or actually he is an accumulator, but he needs to play every day in order to accumulate. So I think in 15-team leagues, especially depending on what his positional eligibility is in your league, I know he's got different eligibilities in different leagues. Like, he could be an interesting bench guy because he is going to play, against right-handed pitching, and he's going to hit like in a decent spot in that Tampa Bay lineup. But in shallower formats, I don't think it's going to be very much. Joe Lowry in the chat, Jay Hook, said, sadly, James Wood needs to work on his defense. So there's another reason why James Wood isn't up. So, all right. Ray, thanks for coming on with me and then talking. I hope you have a fantastic vacation. Want to remind everybody where you can reach the social media and plug anything you got going on.
Thank you. I'm at Ray_Kuhn_28 on social media. You can find my written baseball work over at Fantrax. Going to start doing football over Fantrax, and I have a few football pieces up at Dr. Roto as well.
There you go. And you can find me on all social media platforms as Mason FWFB. You can email me or the show, friendsoffantasybenefits@gmail.com. Catch my written work at Fantasy Pros, where I'm writing 3 days a week, and the Fangraphs, where I'm posting 5 days a week. And then I'm on this podcast and the Sleeper in the Bus podcast. That will wrap us up for this episode. For Ray and myself, thanks for listening. Have a fantastic baseball season.